how to go remote as a developer. My name is Isaac, previous CTO of a funded startup, and I run the checkout team of Pretty Little Thing. How did I get into the role that I am? How long did it take? Honestly, about 5-6 years. I started freelancing, and then after that, I managed to land a midweight role in an agency. Then I got a senior role, a Pretty Little Thing, worked my way up to a lead developer, and after that, I worked in a startup. Then I just went straight into contracting. Contracting is normally a little bit difficult to get into. You kind of normally need to be senior level, but because of my previous experience, and I think the startup as well, I managed to get myself a role in the end. It was a little bit difficult because I didn't have prior contracting experience and they normally favor that, but I managed to get one, and after you get your first role, it gets a lot easier to get subsequent. I wanted to make this video from the lens of what advice would I give to a younger self who had this question, and I think the landscape has changed a lot. When I was younger, remote roles weren't as popular. To get something like this where you could move around, it wasn't as frequent. It was more like you had to be a very specific freelancer or contractor to do something. But I think now you actually can just do it with a 9 to 5 because jobs become more remote. COVID obviously helped that a lot. And what's funny is back in the day, it may have taken like 5-6 years for you to specialize enough where you kind of have that leverage in the workplace to do it. I think now it's actually doable within 1-2 years. Like if you don't have any code language experience, I think it is actually possible. You may have like a hybrid remote situation where it's like once every week or once every 2 weeks. But even if that's the case, like let's say every Wednesday you have to be in the office, like you could actually take a flight out Thursday if you wanted, and you come back next Tuesday. Like it genuinely is possible. Not ideal, but if you're making enough money to afford you the luxury of that, it's doable. So if I was starting over, how would I advise myself to go about getting a remote job? I think first of all, it's very important to not try and bend the job into what it is that you want. I think it's very important to understand what you want and then find something that's appropriate. Because fundamentally, good employers will actually do the same as well. They won't try and mold you into the employee they want. They will find someone that fits into the predefined mold that they have planned for the company culture or whatever. I think fortunately, because of COVID, like I said, things are very remote, but also I think for tech in general, it was quite overpopulated. And as such, people really try and push the benefits of the role that they give people. So a lot of companies don't necessarily want to compete on salary because it's a bit of a slippery slope. And the more you put the salary doesn't actually dictate that people will be involved in the work per se. So paying someone more doesn't necessarily mean they'll be more invested. However, giving people benefits makes them feel like they're more involved with the company and also reduces their stress, which you think gives them more time to actually enjoy their work. Maybe your thing is a little bit more flexibility with time. Some jobs will actually offer that, saying they are completely remote or there's some sort of like hybrid work situation that you might be able to use. Look for these things in job roles. So that's the first step, which is like the precursor. From the jump, you can see that. Secondly, if there's a little bit more flexibility or you like the company, or even actually interestingly enough, if the company's a little bit lower than what you normally get, or if you'd be taking a pay cut, you have a little bit of bargaining leverage. You could say, look, I'm happy not taking the money. You don't have to match my previous salary, or even I'm willing to take a little bit less. However, can I get this situation? Can I only come in once every 2 weeks? Obviously, you're going to get all the meetings, but just lets you work from home. Maybe a situation like that. Or what I'd even advise to myself as well is, why don't you see if you can actually get a job that's so far away commuting wouldn't really make sense. So for example, if I lived in London, but then I went for an interview for like a role in Leeds, and because they know the distance, it's like, okay, just come in once every 2 weeks, just show face whenever or once a month. If you have that kind of situation, you don't even need to tell them that you want to be remote, but it allows you to do any kind of traveling that you want to do. I will be mentioning this book quite a few times on the channel, which was super interesting to me. The book is called So Good They Can't Ignore You, and it basically documents how opportunities you get in your job don't come from you liking your job. You end up liking your job because you're so good at it, you get opportunities. Kind of an interesting paradigm. And in this, one of the people that he actually documented in the book got very good at her job, worked at various startups, blah, blah, blah. And what she would do is she would work at a place until she had enough leverage and power that everyone thinks, wow, she's amazing, don't want to get rid of her. And then she would negotiate down her hours, which is kind of interesting. But she became so useful and valuable in the workplace that she had enough leverage to put things on her terms. So she would say, look, I want to reduce my hours from maybe 40 hours a week to 20 hours a week. I'm willing to take a pay cut for it. However, if you can't do this, I need to look somewhere else. And because of how useful she was and people not wanting to get rid of her, they adjusted to make it make sense. Obviously, this isn't like the easiest approach. Like I said, if you can beforehand actually check that the company aligns with what you want in the first place, way easier. However, this is a legitimate approach and is something worth doing. You do have to, however, be willing to walk away from the company or kind of just idle, and they'll say, oh, whatever, and it won't get done, and you'll hate yourself and hate them. So caveat. So that's how I would navigate the situation. But I would also give myself the rounded viewpoint that working remote may not be all it's cracked up to be. So I do it now and I definitely appreciate it, but I'm in a different place of my career. As a contractor, I feel like I know most of the coding stuff that I want, and learning new code skills, I can kind of lean on previous experience I had or just use the internet. My skill set really now is coming down to a little bit more understanding management, doing stuff like this, like building myself a brand. It's not quite as on the technical side. Midway Isaac, I actually wouldn't suggest for him to take remote work because you get removed from other great developers you could be working with. The best thing really about a job, which sounds ironic, is not necessarily the money. It's actually the experience you get working in larger and bigger teams. And if you're doing that, you might as well be close to it. Remote does separate you a lot. Like, I don't really get to work with the team that much, and because of that, yeah, I can jump on calls and ask them questions, but when I worked at Pretty Little Thing, it was so much easier to see how people would work with much larger systems that I never worked with before, how the QA process was. Just being around that environment, you learn so much. It really isn't worth being remote. Yeah, I think if you go remote too early, it can become stagnant. You don't learn what you could be doing. You get distracted with other things, which I'm not saying is bad. It's just whereabouts in your career are you and where do you want to be? Because when you're remote, you want to see the world. You want to actually go out and go to places that you're visiting. However, if you're in a part of your life where you just kind of get very efficient at your job, it's probably worth just working hard and getting a lot of vacation time, and then just when you vacation, do it properly. But in the meantime, you can actually focus on your craft. I wanted to paint a nuanced picture about how, like, remote work isn't all it's cracked up to be. But honestly, especially if you're from a place that has a great conversion rate, like dollars or pounds, when you go to a lot of other countries, it works out very favorably for you. You can live in very nice conditions and settings, and it probably costs you a little bit less than what it would cost you at home. So there's almost no lifestyle benefit to staying home or working in office, apart from the skill set learning aspect. Okay, so this is the advice I actually give myself in terms of painting a picture of what you could actually do and why you would or wouldn't pick it. In terms of actionable steps, if you don't know any code yet, get into a front-end developer. Do that for about a year. As you're working in-house as a front-end developer, work on your back-end skills. There will be a video somewhere here which basically talks about how to become a back-end developer. And the best way to do it, I believe, is working as a front-end developer, because you're on the ground, you're working with other back-end developers, and you can gradually make the transition whilst getting paid, which is perfect. So front-end for a year, work in-house, and then become a back-end for 2 years. Then do a full stack role for 6 months, just so you actually have it under your belt, you know what you're doing. Realistically, you would have been able to do it prior, but 6 months on your CV, you actually have something legit. And from there, you actually probably can start getting more mid-weight full stack roles and working remote. And the previous steps I said about finding the right jobs for you, or getting so valuable that you have leverage. If you already have a little bit of money and you don't have coding experience and you want to learn, honestly, go Bangkok for like 6 months and just bang out like your code course or whatever it is you wanted to learn. Like $3,000 will probably last you a year if you wanted to be frugal. I don't know if you do, but accommodation is really not that bad, and street food, very accessible, incredibly tasty, and quite cheap. The cost of living there isn't very high. You can go high end if you want, but you don't need to. So I'd advise something like that. The point of this video really was I see a lot of people that are wondering how they can use tech to get into remote roles and be able to travel. And honestly, I think a lot of people just need a starting point. It's difficult to actually understand where to put your efforts because the decision fatigue is very tricky to navigate. Normally, you just need a starting point and to believe it's possible. I am a real person and I did this. If I could do this, you could do this. I promise you. It's not actually that complicated. It just takes time and a dedicated, focused effort. In conclusion, I do hope that was useful. However, if you know someone that you think could benefit from this video, whether they're considering how they can actually navigate into a remote role or the pros and cons of doing so, please send them this video so they can get a more informed opinion. Thanks, guys.